India is, as you know, going through a period of turmoil where growth has slowed. We're, I think, in the process of stabilizing. But there's a lot going on in the economy. And perhaps we can start by talking a little bit about the Indian economy, move on to the global economy and the interactions, and then talk about the big uncertainty that faces us over the next few months, which is elections. And we'll bring in Shobna at that point to talk a little bit about it. So perhaps we can start with the economy itself. Chanda, what do you see? What do you think is going to happen? What are your worries? What are your hopes?
Well, I think India has always had two drivers of growth: the demographics and opportunity to invest. And while demographics continues to remain our fundamental strength and has the potential even going forward, currently it's really the investment driver that has slowed down substantially. And the slowdown in the investment driver is not because there are no demands for the produce from the projects that would be set up, but it's really because decision making in the country has slowed down, approvals are not coming on time, and so on. So I think the big challenge and the requirement rather for the economy is to revive the investment driver. But if you look at the past 6 months or so, I think actually some positive steps have been taken. I think we probably bottomed out as far as the GDP growth is concerned, but each of these factors that are looking good today cannot really revive the economy in a very big way unless we really bring back investments. So I think, the fact that agriculture is so far doing okay, the fact that export-oriented industries have started doing better, will take us for some time. But the big revival in the economy can really come out of reviving investments. And for that, really, there is focused decision-making environment and a facilitative environment that the country needs to create.
Arun, you've said again and again that jobs are what we need to be focused on. Entrepreneurship, jobs. How do you see that happening over the next
investments, and we're going to need productive enterprises that will create jobs and attract more investments. And investments are not coming today. Why are these bottlenecks arising is the question. And because the bottlenecks are coming in our projects, for example, we're not getting investments. It's not a matter of no money available to invest in infrastructure, but people have invested in infrastructure and found that their projects are stuck in power infrastructure, road infrastructure. So you're not drawing in more investment. The same true for manufacturing more recently. Activities are slowing down, they are stuck. So what are the brakes on activity in the country? There is a lot of contention in almost everything. It's just a million mutinies or bottlenecks now in everything. Projects are stuck because stakeholders on the environment side or the land side and the investor, there's no agreement. And we are referring all these misunderstandings, disagreements higher up, and the political system cannot resolve so many things up there which need to be resolved in these places where these bottlenecks are arising. There is at this moment a great mistrust in institutions, and that is really paralyzing the decisions and implementation of decisions. So we are in this position today that we've got to improve the way institutions are functioning, the way decisions are being made in a way that is going to be implementable.
Let me get back to the governance issue, and I want to bring Shobna in on that. But going to, one of the big worries that emerging markets like us have is, of course, what the consequences of Fed tapering are. And Randy, you've been a governor at the Fed. You've spoken a lot about monetary policy. Should we be worried, and what should we do?
Well, I just wanted to say in the U.S., we of course have no disagreements in policy. So everything's very, very calm there in that. So certainly the Federal Reserve is engaged in a process of reducing the pace of expansion, and I think it's very important to understand that the tapering is not a contraction, but it's just reducing the pace of additional asset purchases. So rather than buying $85 billion a month, it's buying $75, $65, $55 billion a month. So the Federal Reserve is still expanding its balance sheet, still providing more liquidity to the system. And the question of the taper is that, well, should we gradually wind this down? Should we slow this pace down and eventually stop the additions? Not actually contract, but stop the additions. And it was quite amazing, I think, to almost everyone involved that when Chairman Bernanke last May mentioned the possibility that in 6 to 9 months the Fed may start to reduce the pace of expansion, it caused such tremors throughout the world. And this shows the importance of Fed monetary policy for the world, but it also reveals some of the fragilities that you were discussing in the different markets. So I think the challenges of Fed policy for the world are not just to say, well, we need to stop what the Fed is doing because it's going to have an impact on us. It's how do we make our systems more robust so that when changes do come, we can be resilient to those changes. And I think India is an example of how some of those changes have occurred. Is it perfectly resilient? Well, no country is perfectly resilient to these changes. But I think just very gradual pace of change of the Fed's policies led to big impacts. It's possible that in 2015 interest rates may start to rise. There could be some more impacts there. But I think since this has been telegraphed out for so long, hopefully individual countries will have more opportunity to get ready for that and make the systems more resilient to the potential for capital outflow.
Well, we have a big election coming. Is this the central issue, or what is the central issue in the election? What is it about? What do you think is perturbing the Indian electorate? Are they?
Yeah. You know, I think restoring trust in government fabric, in institutions of governance, is going to be the primary challenge for us. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a lot of that trust getting eroded. Basically, economic or social progress in a country remains largely a political process. And in our case, it hasn't been seen through any bipartisan prisms. It's been going through parliaments, not been functioning. So basically, there have been lots and lots of bottlenecks. India is ranked very, very poorly in terms of ease of doing business. So restoring the government credibility, and that can't happen unless you have the elections and you have a fresh government and a fresh mandate, and a government that comes empowered to act and take bona fide decisions, is what is actually going to see the entire economy kickstart.
But Randy, this issue of governance is not just an Indian issue.
For sure.
This issue of trust is not just an Indian issue. I mean, you've been through a period when the Fed took very many decisions, and there have been substantial accusations since then that they were favoring the banks, and there's a lot of I think discussion going on in the United States about the rescues. But leading on from the rescues, do you think there is an issue of governance there also? And what are there any similarities, any commonalities in this distrust of government and regulation?
Sure, and that's why I made the joke when Arun had said about that we have no disagreements in the U.S. that everyone agrees. There's very robust discussion both about the Fed's responses to the crisis. Some people saying it saved us from a repeat of the Great Depression, and other people making accusations about playing favorites. I think it was crucial from my perspective to have done the kinds of support that we did for the economy, and really that came from the work that Milton Friedman, a great University of Chicago economist, had done with Anna Schwartz in the monetary history of the United States. Because in the early 1930s, the Fed just stood by as the price level was coming down by a third, unemployment was going up to 20%, GDP was collapsing by about 30%, and the Fed just stood by. And Milton Friedman said, the Depression became the Great Depression because of the Fed's inactions. And so clearly we were trying to learn some lessons from Milton Friedman about how not to act. And well, perhaps we didn't do everything perfectly. I think we did prevent the crisis from becoming a full-fledged depression and a worldwide depression. One of the reasons for having a central bank is to be able to act quickly as a lender of last resort in difficult situations, rather than go through the whole legislative process that you may have the full-blown crisis before a decision is made. And so I think the Fed has made progress, and the legislative process has made progress in having more transparency, more understanding of the powers that the central bank can have. Some of those powers have been curtailed. We'll see if that's gone too far in when the next crisis comes. I think the Fed moved from being just the front page of the business press to being the front page of the newspaper, and so put it in a different kind of spotlight. And so that's why I think questions of trust, questions of governance have gotten increased attention. But I think for the moment, people are feeling more comfortable with the place that the Fed is and the governance that the Fed has.
Well, there's been a lot of anger at the bankers in the U.S. You think that's justified? Do you think it's gone overboard? And then I want to ask Chanda about some of the concerns about banks here and whether that has also gone overboard.
Now, how could anyone be angry with Chandra? That's impossible. Certainly there's always a desire to find who did it, who's responsible, and sort of point the finger of blame. And I think it's very difficult to come up with the individual scapegoats or individuals who were, if it were only for that person acting differently, we wouldn't have had the situation. The situation was a very broad one. There are many fragilities in the marketplace that broadly supervisors were not fully aware of, and many market participants weren't fully aware of. So it's hard to just say, aha, if only that person hadn't been there, or if that person had their wings clipped, then we wouldn't have had the challenges we had. We had a fragile system, and there are many people to point the finger of blame at. And so I think it's easy to focus on one particular group, and certainly there are many bankers who did do things that weren't certainly in the best interest of the system as a whole, and often, as it turns out, not in their own best interest. But there are many people around the world in many institutions that were taking risks without looking at those risks, not doing sufficient due diligence, not asking questions that could have easily been asked.
Let me go to Chanda. Chanda, here in India we have, especially on the public sector banks and not in the private banks, growing non-performing assets. Hopefully they will stabilize, but it has become somewhat of an issue. Do you think bankers are to blame here? What's going on?
So first, I think let me break this into two parts. One is the lack of trust or the anger that we saw in the US and some of the countries in the 2009-10 period and the reasons for that. And then let me come to, in the second part, the current situation and the concerns around quality of assets. So I would say that, that lack of trust, etc., which happened when the global financial crisis took place in the US, in fact did not happen in India at all against the bankers. And the reasons were twofold. I think one was that while, say, in a country like US, probably the whole, crisis started with, the weakness in the financial system, and it impacted the rest of the economy. In India, even while the rest of the economy to some extent got impacted by global movements, the banking sector continued to remain strong, and in a way remained like that strong heart which then pumped the blood to the rest of the limbs of the body, so to say, and the economy continued to move. So actually banking became the backbone for the Indian economy at that time. And the other thing was why banking continued to remain strong was because, of course, of all the prudent regulations that were there and have been there in the Indian sector, but also because of the very prudent credit decisioning manners. In the current situation, I think the big concern around banking today is the quality of assets. Now, the issue is, where should the anger lie? We must remember that we're talking of an economy that was just about 8 quarters or so ago growing at 9% per annum, and from there on has sharply adjusted to 4.5% per annum. I think that kind of adjustment has an impact all around on the entire economy and therefore on the quality of assets. The second is that as these assets were being built up and the banks were participating in financing these projects, those were based on certain assumptions that approvals will come on time, assumptions that the power projects will get completed in 30 months, assumptions that even after they are completed, coal would be available and so on. I think a lot of things have happened outside of the control of the bankers that have changed these assumptions. And that's why the quality of those assets is not as good as what was envisaged at that point in time. I think we should not be overly concerned even about the quality of these assets for two reasons. That, even today when you look at the banking assets, the retail side, the consumer side of the assets is continuing to perform in a very stable manner. The loss rates there, irrespective of what happens to the growth rate, is actually very much under control, partly because of the reasons as I mentioned. People have their jobs, people want to pay up their loans, people want to live peacefully in their homes and drive the cars for which they have taken the loans. As far as the large projects are concerned, clearly these projects are not generating the cash flows that they were supposed to generate by now. Projects are complete, but they don't have the raw material, they don't have the connection, the backward linkages, so they're not generating cash flows. Leverage levels have gone up. But at this time, if the bankers hold the hand of the intrinsically viable projects, I think these projects will grow out of their problems as the economy grows. So clearly it's not, today we have 20,000 megawatts of power capacity that is not producing power. It's not that if they start producing power, India will not consume power. It's just that today those approvals for mines or those coal linkages are not there. So I think if those issues get sorted out, if it comes back to what I said earlier, decisions start getting made, approvals are given, the cash flows to these projects would come back. So it is the time to handhold, and most, not all, but most of these projects should grow out with the growth in the economy.
So you essentially giving hope and also saying that every bad loan doesn't mean it's an act of corruption or an act of incompetence. It could be just bad luck. And bankers are meant to take risks, and risks sometimes end up going the wrong way. So now, I want to move to a somewhat different issue, which is, cultural differences, so to speak. And, one of the incidents which brings cultural differences to the fore is the most recent incident of our Deputy Consul in New York, Devyani Khobragade. Could you speak to that a little bit and talk about some of these differences and where they may come from?
On this particular case, actually, it's a different story altogether. But I do think that Indians are slightly more sensitive, perhaps, than their European counterparts on issues of privileges, on issues of each one's own rights or standing, because Devyani's case was a classical example. But if you look back and you look at the case when our former president Abdul Kalam was frisked, or you look at one of our superstars, Shah Rukh Khan, who was frisked, and to my mind, as a media person, I saw no harm in that, because I think the same treatment has to be meted out to everybody. Of course, you can keep the former president out of the loop, but whether you're a superstar or you're a leading politician or a corporate, I think the law remains the same. But there was quite a hue and cry when a lot of our so-called Indian icons were actually frisked in America, and it was taken up in a big way by the Indian authorities. The press highlighted what had happened because these were celebrities, these were people, and everyone is interested in knowing what's happening to them. But I think it got blown out of proportion in Devyani's case, if I may say so, largely by the diplomatic corps.
So you're saying don't leave foreign policy in the hands of the foreign ministry?
I wouldn't say that, but I think because this was one of them. Because when you had the former president or you had Shah Rukh Khan or several other things, the reaction was a lot more proportionate. But in this case, because it was a diplomat, I think there was a greater degree of alarm.
Arun, do you see this differently? Do you have a...
No, I see something, yes, not differently. As you pointed out and Shobna confirmed, maybe the people in the two countries saw it differently. But as she said, maybe the more important thing is what were the diplomats doing? That the world has changed. No policymaker is able to shut the world out and take decisions. I know you said that till day after tomorrow you are shut off, but you can't. In today's world, everything you do and say is out there, and what people feel about it is reflected back at you immediately, and you have to respond. In fact, you're anticipating what they would think about what you do, and that is influencing the way you shape policy.
Shobna, disruptive, good, bad? How do you think about social media?
I wouldn't want to put it in either bucket and call it good or bad, but it's a reality and it can't be wished away, and it makes everything real time. So I think this whole information technology has completely changed the way in which we govern the country, because now no news can be suppressed. Social media is here to stay, and the social media does capture the basic trend. It may at times get exaggerated, but it does capture the essence of what's happening. And therefore, I think it can be also used as a very powerful tool, as a very powerful vehicle, if the government or the policymakers so desire.
But this issue of trust,
I want to link that, if policymakers so desire. So we have been looking at it. It's a phenomena. You can't wish it away. I mean, people are trying to wish it away, but you can't wish it away. It's there. The social media puts things into small fragments, billions of pieces. What's the sense that you make out of it? It's very difficult to make a sense which lasts for a long time out of it. It's good for raising people's passions and getting a moment to stall something, to stop something. But you can't, as someone wrote, you can't tweet a constitution. You've got to sit down and deliberate thoughtfully over time, or a few days at least, and say, what's the narrative here? And this is not by interrupted tweets. So as we also in the Planning Commission used social media to help us to make the plan, really we found it doesn't help, not to get the narrative of what you want. I mean, you get a lot of opinions and stray things and so on.
How do you find social media, Chanda, in your business?
Today it's internet on the move. Everybody wants to do everything on their phone, whatever they could have done sitting in their home on the internet, and it's social media. So, again, I think it's a reality. It's something that we have to work with, and the question is, can it be good or bad? Depends on how you put it to use. So I think the way we use it is that we actually look at it as a very positive method of feedback, and something that keeps us alive to the situation, whether it's in terms of customer service, it's in terms of customer feedback, it's what's happening. And consciously, we need to build response mechanisms to be able to react to everything that is coming out of social media.
Do you tweet?
I don't, but I actually follow everything on Facebook.
Okay.
So.
Do you tweet?
Well, I have an account so I can follow others' tweets and I can read all the tweets.
Arun?
No, I tried it, but I've given it up.
You've given it up.
No, I've not given it up. I've consciously been told by my bank that I should not tweet, because the moment I start tweeting, it will become unmanageable for me. So it's a conscious.
Randy?
Well, that's how the Federal Reserve communicates monetary policy these days.
Oh.
No, I don't tweet.
You don't tweet. I have a few fake tweet accounts going, people pretending to be me.
No, exactly. That's some of the dangers of social media, because it becomes difficult to check the source. So the positive is that you get this immediacy. The difficulty is that sometimes it's not well founded.